This is 6 Minute News. I'm lead anchor Dave Angani, and this is assistant to the lead anchor.
Assistant lead anchor.
Assistant to the lead anchor J.D. Keller, and this is 6 Minute News.
A just war? Today we're going to analyze whether America's entrance into World War II was just or not.
Tune in at 6 o'clock for the full details. On today's show, we will be interviewing Dr. Hudson, a professor of history from Stanford University who specializes in studies relating to World War II.
Hi, Dr. Hudson, for being on the show today. So today we're going to talk about the Christian just war theory, and I know you specialize in this, in what you majored in. So according to the jus ad bellum theory, do you think that the U.S. had just cause to enter the war?
Well, first, I'd like to thank you for having me on your show. And back to your question, yes, the U.S. did have just cause. Because first, the Japanese attacked the U.S. on home soil through the attacks at Pearl Harbor. And second, the Germans were holding Jews in concentration camps, which was directly taking away their human dignity and affecting their lives negatively.
Okay, so the second point of the jus ad bellum theory is competent authority. Do you feel that the U.S. had competent authority?
Yes, I do, because President Roosevelt made the decision to declare war, and he is a very competent, authoritative figure in the U.S. and had the right to make that decision.
Okay, so a third bullet point would be comparative justice. Do you feel that the killing of the soldiers was just?
I believe that this question is two-sided. It was partly just because the U.S. fought to kill the soldiers who were inflicting harm to Jews and innocent civilians. But on the other hand, the U.S. did kill innocent civilians on this path to kill soldiers, which made it partly unjust.
Okay, so, and I know that according to Christian faith, a lot of it is more than just the means and the ends. A lot of it is based on the intention. So do you feel that the U.S. had the right intention in the war?
Yes, I do, because the U.S. strove to protect the lives of the Jews and enforce their human dignity, which was wrongly taken away by the Germans. And they were giving the Jews the ability to live and succeed to their maximum potential.
Okay, so also, as we know, the government's the main point of government is to help the people.
Yes.
And a lot of that is not going to wars that maybe they shouldn't. So do you feel that this was like a last resort?
I do not. I believe that the U.S. made an immediate decision and did not think of other options, and they went straight to war. They, as soon as they heard of conflict, they went to war. They didn't weigh any other options and try to solve the conflict.
Okay, and also in jus ad bellum, they also discussed the probability of success. How do you feel that was for the U.S.?
Well, I believe that the U.S. went into this war believing that there was a high probability of success, making their entrance into the war a just entrance.
Okay, so the last and final bullet point that we have for jus ad bellum would be proportionality. Do you feel like this was rightly proportioned?
Yes, because I believe that even though the war costed a lot of money, it saved a lot of lives, protected the human dignity of many, and helped improve the economy, which in turn would bring in more money for the U.S. and be ultimately beneficial.
Okay, thanks for being on the show, Dr. Hudson.
It's my pleasure.
Now we will be interviewing Professor Halpert. He is a PhD doctor who specializes in morality during wartime from Columbia University. Hello, Dr. Halpert. Thank you for being on the show today. So today I'd like to address the jus in bello principle of the Catholic just war theory. So this theory, as we know, has two parts, discrimination and proportionality. So for the first one, discrimination, how do you think the United States handled the proper distinguishing between combatants and civilians in the war?
Okay, so I feel like this question is two-parted because they're dealing with both the Japanese and the Germans. And in Japan, the U.S. killed many civilians with the bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and therefore inherently not differentiating between the combatants and the civilians. And also, while in America, they put the Japanese into internment camps regardless of whether they were citizens of the United States or Japanese soldiers. And then when it comes to Germany, America used air raids and ground soldiers that led to some combatant deaths, but also many civilian deaths. and therefore not enforcing the civilian immunity that is inherently within the Justin Bellow theory.
All right, thank you. So in terms of proportionality, how do you think the U.S. handled the balance between retaliation? So was the retaliation equal in the war?
Okay, similar to discrimination, this question is also two-parted. In Japan, at the beginning of the war, the U.S. used ground troops and their navy to combat the Japanese, but they resorted to the nuclear bombs as a final resort, and this action was not proportionate and therefore inherently unjust because it killed a shockingly high number of civilians, which was way higher than the deaths that came from Pearl Harbor. And in Pearl Harbor, most of the deaths came to the U.S. soldiers also. So they did lack proportionality, and the retaliation was not equal in Japan. However, in Germany, the U.S. did use ground troops similar to how the Germans did, and therefore their retaliation was equal and therefore proportional.
All right, thank you. Our final guest speaker today will be Dr. Scott, a professor of European history from Harvard University.
Hello, Dr. Scott, and welcome to our show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be on the show.
Today we'll be talking about the just post bellum facet of just war theory, which discusses moral duties once combat has ended. So following this, what is your opinion on the vindication of rights principle and how the U.S. incorporated it in their post-World War II efforts?
Well, the vindication of rights states that you need to reestablish rights of those that during the war had been taken away from them. So in World War II, this was the Jewish people. So after they were released from the concentration camps by the United States did free them. They did reestablish their rights after that. So in terms of that, the United States did follow the principle.
All right. And similarly, what is your opinion on the reconciliation principle and how the U.S. employed this during post-war efforts?
So the reconciliation principle states that there must be repent for your actions. So after the war, you must not unnecessarily punish the defeated nation. So I don't think the United States followed this principle in its entirety, because in terms of Japan and Germany, Germany specifically, they forced the country to pay reparations of $23 billion, and they destroyed their factories that were used during the wartime. This left Germany in severe economic trouble. And in terms of Japan, they dictated a new constitution for Japan and took away rights of major corporations. So I think that the United States was very harsh on these two countries, which show that they did not follow the principle of reconciliation.
And finally, did the U.S. employ the principle of restoration by helping the defeated countries regain their self to a functional society?
So, in terms of Japan, I would say that yes, the United States did help Japan. Like I mentioned before, yes, they were severely harsh on these countries, but they did help them. So, in terms of Japan, they occupied Japan and they helped them reconstruct society.
And finally, what is your opinion on the restoration principle, which discusses how the victorious countries should help the defeated countries get back on their feet and regain a functional society?
So, like I said before, although the United States was harsh on Japan and Germany, they did help the two countries build up and become where they are today. So in terms of Japan, they occupied Japan and they helped them reconstruct society. The United States occupying forces led by General Douglas A. MacArthur enacted widespread military, political, economic, and social reforms, which all helped the country get back on track. And in terms of Germany, the Marshall Plan, part of the Marshall Plan, the U.S. donated $13 billion to Europe to help the recovery program and provide general aid. So this shows that although the punishments were harsh, the U.S. did help the countries restore to a proper functioning state.
All right. That was all very helpful information. Thank you, Dr. Scott.
Yep, thank you.
Therefore, we can conclude that America's entrance into World War II was indeed just.
Thank you for tuning in today. A special thank you to Dr. Scott, Dr. Halpert, and Dr. Hudson for their contributions to the show. Tune in next week for an episode of 6 Minute News.